Have any of you begun to get rather confused as to why no one in mainstream politics seems to have your back at all or have any of your interest in mind? That both parties seem to be obsessed with things that have nothing to do with you, that so much is being asked of you, yet nothing is ever being given back to you. I certainly have been wondering about these things, and my whole life I have watched people tell me that I need to think of the poor people of various Middle Eastern countries, and that the way to help them is to fund a war against them for some reason. Or that I need to think of like the trans people or the poor people of South America or whoever. Always some group that I have very little to do with, and who my neighbor also has very little to do with, if we have anything to do with them at all. Yet, despite this, that is who I'm supposed to be thinking about. I watch our politicians go on about this stuff. I mean, like I'm from South Carolina. The Our wonderful representative Nancy Mace is just going off about transgender bathrooms. Our recently deceased Lindsey Graham. All he would talk about is what's going on in the Middle East, and it's not just a South Carolina problem. Of course, the odds are if you are in America that your politicians are going off about one of those two issues, which is insane given that I watch so many of my peers struggle to survive and watch most of us resign ourselves to a life that's going to be much worse than what our parents had. Like, who's really expecting to have it as good as their parents in 2026? When I look at when I look on the job sites, I see a bunch of jobs that want several years of experience, many that offer no benefits, many of which are actually just scams, but more on that in another video, and most of which are paying or somewhere around 40K a year. Meanwhile, houses are costing $500,000. Then I think naturally our leaders are concerned about this, and that at the very least they're discussing it. But no, it's time to once again, we got to worry about the Middle East. We got to worry about gender expression. Like, those are the two causes available for you to champion as you spend your entire paycheck on groceries and rent for the apartment you share with three other people, which is just, it's total madness. And political talking heads will have the nerve to go, "Oh my gosh, young people are so obsessed with grievance politics." Many have said something to this effect, but the one who I heard say it recently was Ben Shapiro, and it just made me think. For one, Ben Shapiro is constantly crashing out about something. How dare he say that? Like, he's got a lot of nerve saying that. But also, if you're involved in politics without any grievances, you're a freak. Like, what are you in it for in that case? Like, this nonsense is a fun hobby for you or something? I find that such an insane point. Like, I don't want to be involved in this. I don't want to be thinking about this stuff. I don't want to be involved in it. I want to be talking about, fish keeping, like aquariums. It's my hobby, or homesteading, or these other things that I'm interested in that are actually pleasant and enjoyable to talk about. But of course, I'm talking about this stuff because I believe that someone needs to talk about these problems, and I've always been telling people that. So it's kind of, I made this channel to talk about it. Put my money where my mouth is a bit. And I hope as many people as possible start talking about these issues and sharing their grievances and offering no support to those who won't promise to address said grievances at the very least. It's also crazy to me that anytime I or someone like me wants to advocate for ourselves, we're hit with so much. I hate to sound trite, but I guess the word is hate. That's kind of a word that's been thrown around in very unusual ways, at least in my lifetime. But it is hate that we receive when we try to advocate for ourselves. They hate us for wanting a future. They hate it. They hate when we say, prioritize us at all. We are your constituents. We are the ones who elect you. We're the ones who pay your salary, all of which they take for granted. I mean, many of them openly look down on us like we're stupid rubes, not worth taking seriously. Meanwhile, if some defense contractor says jump, they say how high. And it's just so backwards. Like, another good example of how backwards things are is when someone confronts a politician about the corruption. They often go, "But it's not illegal." Okay, and I don't care if it's illegal or not. We all know that it's wrong. And people who are evil have been writing the laws, and we want them changed. That is our point. So, like, shut it with the but it was legal. You get this about campaign donations, politicians being given high paying nonsense position jobs at companies, after they've left politics or whatever. Like, another great South Carolina example, Nikki Haley, like, quit being governor and then was some kind of, she was like the on the board at Boeing being paid an enormous salary for some reason, and then she launches a presidential campaign and she's just like the queen of the defense contractors all of a sudden. It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, and another example of these things that are legal but obviously shouldn't be. It'd be like the infamous Pelosi investment portfolio that so happens to beat out all the most successful all the most successful investors. And how could I, not mention Trump's insane crypto rug pull? It's legal for the president to run a cryptocurrency scam. It's just like all this stuff, like it's like technically legal, but obviously it is wrong and should change. Everyone knows this. But yet all we're told is like, well, but it's legal. Gosh, who cares? But anyway, let's take a closer look at each party, shall we? On the left, they've made it clear my entire life that they hate me. They've tried walking this back a bit in recent years, but they've never really apologized. They never said, hey, it was wrong to try painting white plebeians as the cause of all the nation's ills, and sorry for setting race relations back 100 years. Like, think about how crazy that really was. Like, to see, at least where I live in a poorer part of the country. I can see a bunch of like white redneck types living in what's basically squalor, while wealthy Democratic politicians go on about how really it's those guys who hold all the power in this country and they're so privileged. Meanwhile, they're talking about a person who's barely in control of their own life, much less holding any sort of power over others. Also, and if you're part of one of the, also again, if you're part of one of these demographics that the left has claimed to be helping the past 20 or so years, have things actually got better for you? Like, is it better to be, like a homosexual or part of some minority group in 2026 than it was in, like, say, 2006? I kind of think not. Like, all the left has really gotten for the billions, probably trillions at this point, of dollars that they've spent on these causes is people having more animosity for these minority groups because they perceive them as having received more attention from our leaders than them, which isn't necessarily a fair reason to dislike them, but it is a true reason because it is true that these people were prioritized. Like, the conversation really centered around them, and a lot of the funding was centering around having that conversation. So, like, it's not a fair grievance, but it's a true grievance. But the only people that like on the Democrat side now, the only people who seem to be speaking to actual people are these DSA types. But the DSA is pushing an economic system that's never worked, and they don't seem to really even understand what they're advocating for. And I also find it odd that billionaires are behind many of them. I do not believe that these billionaires are intentionally funding the end of their wealth. So why do they back the DSA? So regardless, I mean, I won't be supporting that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I would really like an answer on it. But I won't be supporting it, and I still feel like none of them really have my interest in mind to begin, regardless. But it's not that the Republicans are any better. Neocons only care about war and placating their boomer base by assuring them that the houses will remain unaffordable so they can sell their homes to Blackstone for a higher profit. And that sounds like a parody, but that's basically been the party platform. And on paper, their economic stances are more sane, but they always end up supporting more debt and more money printing, so how sane are they really? And to those who say Trump is going to save us, I don't believe you either. First, all the most horrible neocons love him all of a sudden, and that's a sign, but there are a lot of reasons I don't believe in Trump anymore, but a good one to mention here would be his Laura Ingraham interview. When Ingraham asked about Trump wanting to bring in even more immigration, which was kind of the whole reason he won, was to not do that. Trump said that Americans did not have the talent for these fields, to which, like, what? The technology in question was first made in America. Why wouldn't Americans have the talent to keep working on it? Also, why would these other countries actually let us take these talented people away if they exist at all? It doesn't really make any sense. And saying this as wages stagnate and the only hope for the future are these like shiny new industries which aren't projected to be good for job generation, but it's all we have. Like, that's all that's on the horizon. And so, like, that really means we aren't interested in you. This new thing we are working on is not for you either. And how can I look at something like that, at the war, at who is in the administration, and say, yeah, this guy's going to fix things? That would be delusional. Quit asking me to believe in that. I don't understand the fervor. People are so insistent. They're like, you got to believe. You're not trusting the plan enough. Just to me it seems kind of psychotic. And also I'm not one of those like TDS types. I'm very far from that, but I'm not so stupid to think that like it's just like the Trump administration walked in and ruined everything, because that's not what happened. These problems have been brewing for a long time, and I don't think Kamala was going to fix anything, nor do I think whatever stooges they roll out next will either. A lot of it's kind of another issue I've got with the Democrats is they're kind of acting like everything was perfect, like say 15 years ago, when it just wasn't. And a lot of the problems we're having were long since set in motion back then. So again, it just kind of shows they don't even know what they're talking about. But not that Trump's doing a good job by any means. I'm just acknowledging that these problems did not show up this past year. A lot of this has been going on a long time. Anyway, we'll see what stooges they roll out next. But still, our leaders don't care, especially not those with power inside the two main political parties. Our problems will continue to be ignored, and they will continue to trot out goons like Brylan Hollyhand, or as I call him, Peach's Cookie Fingers, because he has a Santa Elf type name. And they'll trot out guys like him to say, actually, people my age love inflation. Don't worry, guys, just keep going as you are. Which, how crazy is that? Like, I guess they're trying to make the people who haven't really woken up to things being in a bad state kind of keep them placated by showing us people like this that like actually things are really good, having all these people come out and say actually things are really good, when almost no one seems to actually feel that way. Anyway, a common critique I hear is stop whining, which is not an intelligent response by any means. It's not how you should respond to people's grievances, but I'm sure that'll be the response this video gets from a certain type of out of touch person. And all I can say to you is, you better hope people keep whining, because you're not going to like the alternative.